Got a real special one for you today. I'm in Tel Aviv, Israel, and here on the Mediterranean Sea. And our special guest today, former Navy SEAL Chad Williams.
How's it going?
Yeah, man. Great to be with you, man.
Super stoked to be here. It's
cool.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hey, let's take a little walk along the sea. And hey, we've known each other for a couple years now, haven't we?
That's right. Yeah, I think we first got connected over social media, and I reached out to you before I was going to go on the news one time and be talking about ISIS, and I'm like, you know what, I want to pick Michael Licona's brain on this one if that's possible. I think that's the first time we actually got on the phone together, and you gave me a really good line for the news, that the latter Muhammad you see in history is very much like the ISIS of today, and that one really resonated with everyone.
Oh, well, thanks, man. Yeah, so it's cool, man. I just and then you sent me your book, which SEAL for God, and I read that thing. It's probably one of the only 3 or 4 books not related to my field, you know, that I've read in the last 30 years. So, man, what a gripping book, man. Highly recommend it. I recommend you read it.
Yeah, I had to read it for the audio. If anyone wants to get the Audible, it's my voice.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Well, that's pretty cool. They get that on Amazon?
And Amazon or sealofchrist.com, you get a signed copy there.
Oh man, well, you gave me a signed copy. I'd definitely go with that one. So, how old are you right now, Chad?
35 years old.
Awesome. And like, how long have you wanted to be a SEAL?
Well,
I guess
it all started kind of coming out of high school, going to a local community college. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life, and I really kind of felt like things were going down the tube. Really, it was my own fault. I wasn't attending school. I was just hanging out with friends, going surfing in the ocean. And as the end of the year was coming up, time to take finals, for whatever reason, that was the moment that it took to really hit me like, wow, I'm turning out to be a loser. I mean, the kind of guy that no young person wants to be. And so I'm just thinking, how do I turn this around? I want to do something big, something great, something significant with my life. And so as I was brainstorming, just sitting in the parking lot at school, that's when that idea entered my mind. Like, I know what I want to do to turn this all around. I want to be a Navy SEAL. And I understood that it's the most difficult military training in the world, like hands down. And so I had this determination very early on, like, I will die before I quit. And so I decided, well, if I'm going to be a SEAL, that means I don't need to go to class anymore. So I started my truck up and took off out of that school parking lot. And I started preparing, though, right away.
Wow. Hey, now we're here, we've been here the whole week in Israel with John Lovell, former Ranger. You said the SEAL is the toughest military training. Would he agree with that?
You know what? I don't think that he would agree with that. And, you know, I understand the partiality, but the numbers do speak for themselves. I started with a class of 173 guys. By graduation day, there's only 13 of that original class number still standing there. And we can't forget, you know, who was it that got bin Laden? Yeah. The Navy SEALs. They call up the best for those kinds of guys.
Now, could he come back and say, well, the reason that, you know, there were, how many that started in your class?
173.
Yeah, maybe he would say all of those were flunk outs from Ranger training.
All the guys that didn't make it?
Yeah, if you didn't, you know, how they say, you know, dentists were people who flunked out of
There's a lot of guys that go through SEAL training and they decide they want to go get their Ranger tab, so they go through the Ranger training too, and they say it's child's play. It's child's play in comparison.
Oh, that's awesome. So, all right, so what was the hardest part of your SEAL training?
The hardest part, it's called Hell Week. It's 5.5 days long. You get 4 hours of sleep. That's not per night. That's a grand total of 4 hours of sleep for the next 5.5 days. From the moment they wake you up in the dark hours in the morning by surprise, I went through in February, so I had a wintertime Hell Week. That air's so cold, you know, it bites, and then you're getting hit with a hose. Now you're shivering cold, and they got, you know, loud noises, machine guns going off, grenade simulators, smoke, and this is the exciting stuff because, you know, this is an adrenaline rush, and you want this to happen. This is your rite of passage. But eventually the adrenaline dumps, and all the bright lights and loud noises go away, and you perform what's called surf torture. And surf torture is basically laying down in the surf zone without a wetsuit on until your shivering turns into what we call jackhammering. You look like you're jackhammering cold. And the instructors play head games. They say, hey, we're gonna keep doing this until, and they'll come up with an arbitrary number. 3 of you give up and quit. And these are guys that have all vowed the same thing that you vow, like, I will die before I quit. And so all I can say is I had to dig deeper than I ever have in my life to be determined and make sure that I'm not one of these guys that gets up out of the water and rings a bell 3 times in front of everybody, signifying that you've quit, and they have to take their class helmet with their name, their rank, class number, and lay it down on the grinder, which is the section we do our morning workouts, and that stays there for the remainder of training, so you know who quit, when they quit. It's all there on display. These surf tortures you do over and over and over. I lost track of how many times we did them. If you're not in the water performing surf torture, you run over 200 miles during those 5.5 days.
Wow.
And that's not just running around with your own body weight. You're carrying a boat or a telephone log probably 90% of the time wherever you go. And that boat's so heavy on the top of your head, it literally rubs through the hair and through the skin in the top of your head. In fact, a guy in a class prior to mine broke his neck underneath one of these boats, so they're no joke. And then you can imagine what it'd be like to have that salt water and beach sand rubbing and grinding in all the unfriendly places on your skin for 5.5 days straight. You know, you just, every nerve you feel exposed. And then on top of all this physical exertion and sleep deprivation, it leads to another thing, hallucinations. And you just see things that just flat out aren't there. And looking back on it, it's pretty funny. You know, but when you're going through it, not so fun. So I hallucinated seeing Ninja Turtles in the water. I'm trying to whack them with paddles. Other guys are throwing hand salutes out into the water of people they think they see riding bicycles across the ocean. And so yeah, it's pretty funny looking back on it, but by far that's the most difficult part of training Hell Week.
Oh, that's just amazing. So, I mean, there's something, most people don't have that kind of mental toughness that you have to be a SEAL, and I guess you're kind of born with that, is that right?
You know, I used to think, man, you either have it or you don't. But I've begun to realize that it is something that actually can be developed. I really do believe mental toughness can be developed. I think even to that degree.
Could you think anyone can develop mental toughness to that degree?
I think anyone can develop mental toughness to that degree, the same way that you could develop physical strength. You develop this sort of mental strength. What it is it's mind over matter. And I've got kind of like, you know, my theories on this, but it definitely makes sense. Mind over matter. Your mind has to overcome the material body. And so how do you develop mental toughness? It's very similar to the way that you develop some type of physical toughness. You have to actually train it. You have to push. And so, you know, way back during like 9/11, there was anthrax that was getting sent around throughout the US mail postal office, not by them, but through them. And it was a big concern because, you know, here we are, we got this like bacteria that can, you know, kill people. And so the military decided, let's get, you know, our guys to be immune to this. Well, how are they going to do that? Well, if we just hit them with anthrax, a lethal amount, that'll kill them. But if we dilute it and we inject it into them in a series of shots, eventually they'll develop a toughness and a tolerance towards it. And so that if they do get exposed to a lethal amount, they will be okay. Theoretically, they should live. In a very similar way, there are certain things when it comes to mental toughness that it's almost like mentally lethal. It's like mental anthrax to most people. But if you expose those people to a diluted version of those things that would mentally break them in a series of steps, eventually they should develop a sort of tolerance and toughness towards what would normally be mentally lethal. Now they actually could thrive and endure through that type of scenario. And so I think that mental toughness has a lot to do with just the experiences that you've had in life. And you develop it very much like David Goggins says, you know, like calluses on your hands. They get tougher and tougher the more you get your hands on those bullet bars.
That's pretty amazing. That is amazing. And wow. So, you know, kind of wrapping up this session, I mean, even though you've been off the teams for a while, you're still staying in shape. You were telling me the other day about your workouts. I mean, how many push-ups and pull-ups did you do? And
just the other day, it was a pyramid, up to 20, back down. It was 400 push-ups and 400 squats in a short amount of time, but yeah.
And when you do a workout with pull-ups, how many do you do?
That day was just 100.
Just 100.
Yeah.
So. Well, it's just amazing, bro. Well, all right. Well, hey, that's pretty interesting stuff. In our next session, we're going to talk about what it was actually like to be a SEAL, and Chad's going to share with us some of the missions he went on.
All right, looking forward to it.